Right, well, let's get more now from that conference which is underway at Constitution Hill. Our reporter Nthakoana Ngatane joins us live. Nthakoana, good afternoon to you once again. Before we get to your guest and before we get into what we've been hearing so far from speakers, talk to us a bit about the stance of the ANC towards this NCC. I mean, they've really distanced themselves from this conference. Is that not short-sighted, especially with the December conference just around the corner?
Well, Natasha, this is the question that we've been asking each and every one of the delegates that we've spoken to, starting with the chairperson of the Stalwarts and Veterans, Wali Serute, as well as veteran Sheila Sisulu, who we spoke to earlier on today, to ask them how do they see this conference lending itself to the change that they want to see when that conference comes in December. Looking at the fact that the Secretary General has said that they don't recognize it. But she says that it is all of them, and not just Sheila Sisulu, all of them say that they see this conference as an opportunity that all members of the ANC in their individual capacities and all South Africans should take that opportunity to tell the ANC which direction it should be going, and to say that they are concerned and they do not doubt that what they will come out with from this conference will go through, because some of the people that are here, it's not just stalwarts, it's not just veterans. She says that some of the people that are in this conference today will in fact be delegates at that December conference that is coming. So they do hope that what they will say here today will in fact have a lot of weight when it comes to the December conference. Natasha?
All right, Nthakoana, thanks so much for that. Nthakoana Ngatane at the Constitution Hill in Johannesburg. But I do believe that you have a guest with you. Just take us briefly through what you and your guest are talking about today.
Well, we have had earlier on today a keynote address, and that was delivered by Professor Njabulo Ndebele. He is the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation and a former chancellor of the University of Cape Town. And he spoke to what the ANC has become and the threat that it faces if it doesn't heed the many warnings that it will be getting from this conference. He spoke about the ANC as a movement that has gone from fighting for liberation in this country to actually looting state resources. So a lot of warnings coming. Also, we have just heard now faith-based leaders talking to the delegates here and bringing forth the role that civil society should be playing in ensuring that the voices of ordinary people are heard by the ANC. But also the delegates saying that the ANC has become a movement that has forgotten the very people that brought it to where it is today. But to talk to me now is former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel, who's now chairperson of Old Mutual. Mr. Manuel, you are credited with overseeing one of the highest economic growths for South Africa. But when we talk about the economy now, and when we've just heard the midterm policy budget, now some really shocking numbers for people like yourselves. Now, when we talk about the issues that are being dealt with here today, some of them are emotional, some of them may probably be subjective, but the numbers don't lie. What do you make of how the situation has manifested itself in the economy?
Well, part of what we have to do is go back. In 1992, the ANC led a process called Ready to Govern, adopted a document, made a series of commitments. That document rolled out into the RDP. The RDP made a series of commitments. And I'd like to believe that the bulk of what we did for a number of years in government spoke to the policy frameworks that were developed during the period when the ANC was not in government. Amongst the issues that we attached a lot of importance to was social spending, and also understanding that the more debt rises, the less you have to spend on people now. I frequently recall a discussion I had with Nelson Mandela as president in '96, when he looked at writing off debt. And when he understood that it was actually workers' money, especially public servants' money, he said, but this money spent, it's you spending more on yesterday than on tomorrow's education. And that's the same issues we face now, because the debt to GDP levels are now at the same at the same height that they were in 1994. And we'd brought it down so considerably from 48 to 28%. Now it's approaching 50, and Minister Gigaba in the medium-term budget policy statement said it'll be 60.2% by 2020. That's very worrying, because the more debt you take, the more you have to service the debt, the less you have available to spend on social services, and people need those services now. They need good quality education, because the gap between rich and poor is growing in leaps and bounds. People who are dependent on public service health care need good quality health care. We must retool the Group Areas Act and look at the built environment and ensure that that families raise, have better space to raise children and so on. It's a Freedom Charter that talks about housing security and comfort. These three things interact. And if you want this, then government must be accountable for the numbers. The tragedy about the conference now as well is everybody's talking about who gets elected without a discussion of a mandate, without a discussion of what the deviation from policy has been. Because the ANC has been in government since 1994. Not all of the policies have been implemented. And there's very little discussion with people about why there are impediments to implementation. And of course, in an environment where there is as much corruption that people see, that people read about, as there is right now, people think that that's the only reason why there isn't service delivery. But unless the African National Congress, in the run-up to the 54th conference, takes the people into confidence to unpack in some detail what a better life for all means, I think it will be saying to people, we don't actually care whether you vote for us in 2019 or not. That's a tragedy. And I'm hoping that the Conference of Stalwarts and Veterans would actually send a message to delegates to take up the policy issues, to understand how the ANC has been alienated from its own base, and to recognize that if you turn your back on the people, they will trample you. It's as basic as that, and I think that the timing of this conference, regardless of what the Secretary General's views are, we know who's in the room, we know what the track record of every individual is in this room, we know the importance of this, and we know that in this gathering is a large reservoir of skills, talent and experience of people who actually feel that they are an integral part of the ANC, despite the fact that we are not in the National Executive Committee. We are an integral part of the ANC, and the ANC had better realize that it's not just about who gets elected onto the NEC, but the ability to link up with people in the communities that is so fundamentally important. And if you don't do that, you can't deliver services, you don't grow the economy. The bulk of people will be poorer and poorer, and this is not for one generation, it's intergenerational. On the other side, people who are well off accumulate wealth, and they tend not to be too concerned, and that gap between rich and poor grows in this country, and democracy will find itself in serious danger as a consequence.
Thank you very much. That is former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel giving us his thoughts, and we suppose this is what he'll be telling this conference, because part of what they will talk about is how the economy of South Africa should recover from terms that we are now hearing like state capture, and we expect that some of the discussions here today will center around how the economy, not just the ANC and not just the country, should recover. Natasha.
Nthakoana, thank you very much. For now, we'll leave it there on Nthakoana Ngatane live from Constitution Hill in Johannesburg.